Welcome to Encore, the show for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, brought to you by the Encore Entrepreneur Institute. Today, we are talking to Teena Handline about personal branding. Whether you have your own business or you're trying to be noticed as a thought leader in your industry, it's all about your branding.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Teena.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We love to have you. This is her second time on the show. So if you missed the first time, and I have to say, because it's also one of my favorite platforms, but you are Mrs. Delaware County America. So tell us what that means.
So I'm honored to have the title of Mrs. Delaware County America. I am competing for the title of Mrs. Pennsylvania America in June next month. I'm so excited. In Philadelphia, and I have the honor of representing my platform, which is chronic illness awareness. As someone who has 4 chronic illnesses, it's a platform really near and dear to my heart, and I think it affects millions of people worldwide, so I'm glad to be a voice for them as well.
Well, good for you. And, we always appreciate your ladies with your volunteerism, your charity work, and your fundraising. So that's awesome. So talk about personal branding. What exactly is it? I know what branding is. I know what marketing is. But what about personal branding? What's that about?
I think personal branding is probably one of the largest pieces of professional development that isn't thought about the most. You get asked questions in interviews. Who are you? What do you like to do? Who are you as a person? I think personal branding is one of the quintessential elements of professional development, whether you are a professional as an entrepreneur, whether you are a business leader, or whether you're just interviewing for a job in the Fortune 500, higher ed, whatever you want to do, you need to know who you are as a brand, because it's how you sell yourself. And it kind of starts internally, and I'll get to that. It's how you sell yourself and know who you are as a person to develop that brand and exploit that outwards. Okay.
Well, I know that's one of the hard questions when you're in a job interview. Who are you? Because we all go to the basics. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and that's kind of boring. I mean, what do you tell people when they ask you, who's Teena?
Well, I start off with, who I am, what I do. I think that kind of helps at least the ground level of personal branding. I think step 1 is just being relatable and being able to have some sort of connection with the person you're speaking with. But on a deeper level, it's who you are as a worker, who you are as a leader, who you are on the day-to-day. Are you motivated? Are you energetic? Are you passionate? It goes a lot deeper than just who you are as titles. I'm Mrs. Delaware County America, but I'm also a lawyer. I'm also an educator. I'm a negotiator. I do all these different things that I'm passionate about. And you want to be able to give yourself different facets. You're not, we're 3D, we're human beings. We have multiple levels to ourselves emotionally. We're driven by different things, and we're all different. And I think the key element to saying who you are as a person, this is what I always say when someone asks who I am, I think I'm a well-oiled machine. I'm driven by my passion and my motivation to what I do. And, I have, like I said earlier, I have 4 chronic illnesses. I have my days where I'm not feeling so good. Mm-hmm. But I let that drive me. There's nothing that I won't do because I'm a passionate leader. Like I said, I'm a negotiator. I have all these different sides to me. I think I'm funny. I try to be funny. And I think, but it's more than just adjectives. It's you in action. It's what do you do in tough situations? What do you do when you feel you're under pressure? And I think those are the qualities that really make you stand out in a crowd.
I love that. It's you in action. That should be your motto. It's you in action. That's your personal branding. I think that's key, because I know when I explained what I did back when I was a videographer, and that's all I did, I would say, because videographer sounds kind of boring, right? Meh. So I would say I'm a storyteller. I tell people a story. I see the world. You see the world basically through my eyes, but it's your story. So that, I think, is more exciting when you do put it in action. So instead of just saying a noun, I'm not just a noun, I'm a verb. So let's make it a verb and action word. So that's great.
Now, I think you have to put it in action for sure.
I love that. So You talked a little bit about using it for job interviews, but why is it important for your professional development? So what about us who already have a job, and how can we use personal branding?
Well, there's two facets to that, I think. I think, for one, in networking purposes, it helps you develop relationships with other people. When you have when you understand who you are and how comfortable you are in your personal brand, it's easy to collaborate and easier to work with other people, because you get to see what your strengths and your weaknesses are and how they work with other people with their strengths and weaknesses. So I think understanding your personal brand first internally helps you execute it externally. I think also it's important for professional development because it helps you grow as a person. You're not stagnant. We experience changes day after day, year after year. And I think understanding that just because your experiences may change your personal brand. And I think your experiences will help you grow as an individual professionally, but it also help elevate and evolve your personal brand as you grow in your position.
Right. No, I think that's great. So that's one of the things I think a lot of people stop doing. Once you get the job, you tend to stop worrying about, what they think of you as a brand anyway. You don't know how to sell yourself. So, and that's important to get to that next level, because I heard a great story from this one speaker, and basically she said that she went to try to get a promotion. And they told her, oh, well, you're not tough enough for this position. And she said, I'm from the South. I do back-breaking work. I can outrun all these people. She's thinking to herself, how am I not the toughest one in here? So what she started doing was every time she talked to someone, she would end it with, well, I'm tough, right? I'm tough, so you better get it right. I'm tough. So and it worked for her, because one day she was in the elevator, and one of the managers, as well as one of the people who was right under him, was in the elevator, and they didn't know she was behind them. And they were like fiddling through papers, like, did you get it right? Because she's tough, right? And so she heard it said back to her. And I love that story. So it stuck with me. And I thought, so whatever you want to be, start telling people, And then it's going to happen. They're going to start saying it back to you.
And I'm a proponent of that. I started my legal career as a contractor, and still figuring myself out, still developing my personal brand. And on my last talk, I talked about trademarks and branding, and I helped companies with their brands, but I wasn't developing myself in the process. And, I learned through different jobs in contracting what I really enjoyed and who I was. And I think, it's funny because now that I'm in a position that I love, I work at Villanova doing contracts and working with people, developing their inventions and helping professors develop their innovations, which is really fun. I feel, I see myself, and what's interesting about my position is I have the opportunity to almost mold my position to what I want to be.
That's great.
And what I want it to be. And I have that control to do that. So it's amazing for me professionally to be able to say, you know what? I want to do contracts, but I want to do regulatory work too. How can I do that? And I think being proactive is number one, and not being stagnant in your position. That's what sounds like your story. What happened? She was like, I'm taking the bull by the horns and I'm going to be proactive. And that's what I'm trying to do too. I love my position, but I want to grow. I want to become a director. I want to become general counsel. I have dreams and goals in my position, and I'm not going to get there just sitting by the 9 to 5 doing the same work every day. I have to be active and keep moving.
Right. Absolutely. So besides what I said about telling people what you want to be and how you want to be perceived, as this one woman did, which I think was awesome. It's my favorite story. How else can you develop your personal brand? How do you do that? Is it a activity or a technique? How do you do that?
Well, some of it's a little bit of self-reflection and figuring out who you are, and you learn through experience. I know for me, I've worked in different positions, and I learned, well, okay, I organize myself in this way, or, I love to go out and network with people. I'm a people person. Let me have a meeting with this professor and figure out his quirks. And, and I think it's a lot of it for me has been learned by networking. Networking is key because you learn other people's personal brands. You learn how they execute different problems and actions and whether or not that fits into your personal mantra. It's kind of like politics in a way. You develop your opinions based on what you learn. I think personal branding can kind of work the same way. You learn, you see how different styles, and you develop mentors, and having a mentor is really helpful, because even though you can have you can still be an individual by having a mentor, but seeing how someone else does it sometimes can help you develop your function and your path, I guess you could say.
No, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about networking.
Yes.
So is that a way you can kind of gauge what other people are thinking about your brand from a networking event? Or how do you tell what people are actually thinking about you and getting them to give you that feedback? Is there a way to do that?
Well, it depends on I think, in what area you're in. So if you're in a networking event where there's multiple people and you're in group conversations, I think that's harder to gauge when you actually have like informational interviews or sit down and have coffee with someone that you meet. And that's something I did a lot when I was in law school, to learn more about the profession and what I was interested in, and also to meet some more contacts in the industry. I would email an attorney, straight up, and that's my brand. I'm very proactive, and I want to meet new people and learn about people in different areas. So I would email someone and be like, I would love to know more about what you do, not just professionally, but how you got there. What was your path? Maybe your path will be different than mine, but maybe it'll give me some ideas to get to where I want to be. Right. And I think it's sometimes you get perceptions back when you're having those conversations. Like I actually landed in an internship doing that,
wow.
And actually going out, and I emailed I interned at Major League Soccer a few years ago, and I had the opportunity I emailed the VP of Legal Affairs and was like, how did you get where you're at? Because I want to know how you've learned your job. Mm-hmm. And I had a couple phone conversations with him. I asked him questions. Should I get my MBA? Do you think that's beneficial? Which I am getting my MBA.
Congratulations on that too.
But I think it would be very, he agreed it would be very helpful for my, as a legal, a nice compliment to my legal degree. Mm-hmm. And he gave me great advice on what classes to take, anything as simple as that to, what books to read. And a couple months down the line, he said, are you still looking for an internship for this summer? And I was, and I spent the summer in Manhattan. It was wonderful. So, that's just a little story to say, my personal brand was to really get myself out there and learn as much as I can. Not saying that's the right thing for everybody. Mm-hmm. You don't need to be an extrovert to be successful at personal branding.
Good to know.
Yeah. I'm very much extroverted, but there have been plenty of successful people who do personal branding who are introverted and successful because they're that way. And I think when you have that mix of people, that's why people are successful, because it's not the same cookie cutter type A extrovert on the street. It's a nice blend of individuals that create something amazing. So
when you're an introvert, though, you have to push yourself to do that sometimes, especially like with networking type events. So that's not so easy, because I know I have said many times over the past, oh, I hate to network, because, I hate to interrupt people when they're talking, to talk about myself or what I'm doing, or to say, anything. So it's not my favorite thing to do. And I remember having to push myself. I can do it, but I don't like to do it. But would I consider myself an introvert? Not really. I'm not as social as I like to be, but I just don't like to interrupt people in their conversations. I feel like, I shouldn't do that. Who am I to interrupt their conversation? It's kind of rude, but you learn, and then you learn how to talk about yourself without sounding like you're talking about yourself too. So that's the other thing. Now,
and that's where the one-on-one would be helpful. Sometimes in those group situations, I've been to them. I've been to certain conferences where they have a meet and greet, and people are just kind of walking aimlessly looking for the right group to talk to. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes a little difficult, and that's sometimes where the one-on-one that I mentioned would be helpful, even if it's just a phone call. You network, it might be not as large of a network, but you're getting more. It's about quality, not quantity. You don't need to know a lot of people. You just need to know the right people.
And I got to tell you, selling yourself as a personal brand over the phone, not cold calling, but like you said, developing these relationships, asking, how did you get to where I want to be, basically. That makes you stand out in the crowd, because everyone today is emailing. Everyone's trying to get to someone through social media. No one's picking up the dang phone. So if you pick up the phone, you're going to stand out right there. At first, they're going to probably be like, who are you? Whatever. But you explain to, I met you here at this networking event. I gave you my card. I really just want to ask you a question. If you have a few seconds, can I?
People are very receptive to that.
Yeah.
And it's something that just started with an email. Open up the conversation and say, I saw you at so-and-so lecture, conference, wherever, and I was really inspired by whatever, or I saw on your personal profile on your website that you're interested in this. I am as well. I think that there is a value in having that interpersonal connection with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but also being able to say who you are. Because, you're not trying to mimic somebody else. You still want to be who you are. But it's quintessential to have those people who have already been there and how they got there, so you can develop your own path and your own personal brand.
Right. No, absolutely. So when you're talking about yourself to someone else, as trying to sell your personal brand almost, how do you do that? Like, is it like an elevator pitch, or is it something that you have prescribed in your head that you kind of memorized to sound natural? How do you sell yourself in a situation where you might be social with a group?
Well, if you're in a networking situation where you're in a group, sometimes it's helpful to walk into, if say there's a circle of people and they're discussing, sports. I'll give sports as an example. They're discussing the NBA playoffs. I've been watching that with my husband a lot. It's a good example. And you hear, oh, so-and-so played really well last night. And you have something to add to and say, oh, but I thought. And then once you have an opinion about something and you can relate to something, step one is having common ground. Mm-hmm. Once you have common ground to actually insert yourself into the conversation, then you can show who you are as how you analyze. I mean, if you're giving your opinion on, oh, he dribbles like this, or oh, he shoots like that, you're showing analytical skills, essentially. You're showing how you view the game. Mm-hmm. Or the commentator said this, the commentator said that. You're showing, okay, it doesn't have to be as literal as this is my personal brand. Someone can pick up your skills and your actions, by what you say. So people can define, who you are just by conversation. Sometimes there's good personal brands, sometimes there's not, depending on who you're talking to, and that's where personalities can clash. That happens, because not all personal brands go together. Not 2 and 2 doesn't equal 4 with everybody. But I think it's essential to when you speak with purpose. I think that's where I'm trying to get at. When you speak, don't just say filler words. Don't just say things that just kind of add to the conversation, but really show, I analyzed this and I saw, Kevin Durant played really well last night in the Oklahoma City game. Or if you disagree, show that you have another perspective and you don't follow the crowd. That shows something about you too. So I think if you have the ability to show your skills in one way or another, whether you're analytical, whether you're perceptive, whether, you have the ability to agree and disagree. Hey, even if you're argumentative in a good way, even if you have the ability to argue and have a different perception, those are all things that can show people your qualities and your personal brand. Right.
I like that. Not all personal brands will get along. Some will clash. So that's interesting, because that's not what you're trying to do when you sell each other your personal brand. You're trying to develop a relationship, but sometimes it just goes,
And that's also very important when you're selling yourself. As much as it's important to speak, it's as important to listen. I think listening, yes, you need to listen to how other people say things, what they say and how they say it, because that gives you the ability to respond in a way to either fit your brand, but also adhere to theirs. Because everyone's going to have their own personal brand and their own personality. And I think when you listen to what they say and how they say it, use that flexibility. That shows you're flexible too, if you know how to respond.
Absolutely.
And to not cause conflict. I think that there's a way to acknowledge that and to not see it as conflict. And you can avoid that by listening. It's not always about spouting your personal brand. Guess what? Listening is a very important trait too.
I think that's one of the most important things. If you take away anything tonight, is that because listening is such an art form these days. Because if you gauge people, just take like tomorrow at work or wherever, and just gauge people if they're really listening to what you're saying. You can tell by their body language they're not listening. You can tell by how they have their own track of what they want to get across to you. And, they'll basically just keep talking on that track, even though you kind of directed them to this track. They'll just keep on. It's amazing how many people don't listen. They have their own agenda. And I'm just always just like, when people don't listen, I tend to shut down for a minute because I'm like, you're not listening anyway. Why am I going to waste my breath?
Body language and
right. So this is my shutdown, just like most people, right? So yeah, you tend to, when people don't listen, first of all, the other person's going to shut down. So you do have to listen if you want that relationship to go anywhere. So I think that's so important, so important. So,
and it's fascinating because when I took a negotiation class in law school, and step one was, before you develop any sort of rapport or whatever, listen to their position, because that's how you'll plan out everything else. Listen to what they want. And if you listen to what they want, then you'll figure out what's important to them. You'll figure out what you can leverage. And you can it was like the ABCs of negotiation. And step one was listening. And if you don't listen, you're probably not going to get the deal done, and you're going to stalemate. And it was amazing. I'm getting a little down the weeds in business, but really it was like key. If you don't listen, you're not going to probably engage or develop the rapport with that person. So really, to make a deal.
The most successful business people know how to listen.
Absolutely.
Like you said, because then you could plan your strategy. So if you want to be successful, you have to learn. I am so on board with that. Now, let me ask let's go back to the job interview situation, because I've always heard that if you're in an interview, you should try to find something in the office that you guys have in common so you can talk about that. And that's an intro. And usually it makes the person relate to you so they can feel good about you. Is that working with your personal brand? Because, of course, you don't want to find something and make it up. Like, oh, I play golf too, Oh, really? What's your handicap? Oh, my handicap. So you're stuck. So how do you do that?
Well, I think the best interviews I've ever had have always been conversational because of that. You get to say, even if it's simple as you see something in their office, as something like, I had a conversation, the job I have now, she is very, very into music, and so am I. It just happened that we're similar in that regard. And we had a 20-minute conversation about classical music, and she's a vocalist, and so was I. But if you run into the situation, which I have, where you have nothing in common, the job will bring you two together. If that person's interviewing for the position, they have a stake and they have a priority in making sure the right person is in that position. And at that point, if you're interested in that position, you want that position, you need to say, what really drives me to this. For instance, I'm a contracts attorney. I love contracts. Sounds crazy, but I really do. I love contracts. And I had a conversation with her, and she understood my perception about my work. I had passion for my work. And we were able to connect on that level as well, because it was like, okay, she likes music. That's helpful. But she's going to be passionate about her work because she really likes what she does. So if all else fails and you don't have that connection, and, do your research. You'd be surprised what Google will tell you about an individual before you meet them.
True.
Usually, something in the bio online or LinkedIn about different groups they're involved in. They're a member of this organization, and you're like, really? Why? And, so sometimes, and it, ironically enough, could be something that you have in common. Or if not, that could be a question. If it comes up, it's a little awkward. Like, if I saw online that you're a member of PETA, or something, that there's no connection to that to your job. So you don't want to be too prepared.
You sound like a stalker.
I don't want to do that. But
right.
I think it's helpful to, if all else fails, you're there for a job. And I think it's important to show that you're passionate about the work that you do, but not that you're passionate, period. You're passionate because you have a reason. You have a story, have an experience. Because if you're able to walk down, like you said earlier, storytell. You can storytell about an experience that really shaped who you are as a professional. They'll see that you really took pride and integrity into your work. So I had a contract story where, we stalemated for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I told her what I learned from it. She didn't ask what I learned from it, but I told her. And I was a little proactive about my information. And I wanted her to know what I learned from it. So she knew I don't just take a contract, ask you to sign it, and move on. I really think about it. I'm a thinker. And, you want to sometimes really show that you're, I don't say in love with your work, but you're really passionate about it, because then they'll see you as a standout.
Absolutely. So what's the difference between using a personal brand in business versus a personal relationship? Can you use this in personal relationships, and how?
Oh, yeah. I think, well, first off, I think it's important to note that you might not just have one personal brand. You might have multiple facets to your brand. I'm professional and energetic in my job, but I'm also artistic and creative, and that's part of my brand. I think that helps me in my job, but I think that's more important for me for my personal relationships. I think that you can utilize your personal brand more than just work. I think it's more important. It's very important for professional development, but I've met some of my probably closest friends by being able to be open and share myself, my energy, my passions, my love for music, my pageantry. I've met some of my best friends being able to be open and share myself and my personal brand. Also, going back to listening, I think having the ability to listen and see how other people present themselves and their personal brand can help you strengthen personal relationships that you might not think that you would have had to begin with.
Right. Well, you talked a little bit about the clashing of personal brands. Are there any other negatives to consider when developing your brand and how you use it?
I think it's important to acknowledge your weaknesses. I think everybody has them. I think that, your personal brand is not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. Everyone has something that's going to be a negative. And I think it's important to acknowledge that and work on strengthening it if you can, but also acknowledge that it exists. Nobody's perfect. No personal brand is perfect. And I think it's important to embrace those weaknesses as part of your personal brand versus just saying, oh, they're there and I'll deal with them. That's just life. They're just part of who I am. So I think some of the negatives of personal branding is you're going to have weaknesses. And once again, listening and understanding your weaknesses internally will help you manage the relationships externally by acknowledging that you have those weaknesses. So for example, I'm a little bit of a control freak. I would say that's one of my negatives about myself. And I know that. I'm very type A, which is good for some things, but bad for others. And I acknowledge that. And sometimes I actually have a coworker, it's a perfect example. She's the complete opposite. Very laid back, very, it'll all work out in the end. And here I am panicking because, something's not working out the way I want it to, or the way I think it should. And sometimes you just have to understand with your personal brand, it's not always about just how your personal brand is, it's how it collaborates with other people. And it's sometimes hard to let that go and to acknowledge the parts of your personal brand that are actually at work. Because your whole personal brand isn't just one, like I said, it's not one facet. It's an intricacy, it's a puzzle. And different pieces work at different times depending on what you're doing. So I think it's important to acknowledge that the wrong pieces might not be working at the times that you want it to, or it's not always what you want it to be. And I think it's important to internalize that before you act.
So it's kind of important to really know yourself and take an introspective look at who you are and develop your personal brand. So you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses. And is it important to take those weaknesses and show how they can actually be strengths in some situations, depending on, if you're in a job interview, of course, or someplace else? Is there a way to put a positive spin on it? Is that what we should do?
I think that's helpful, especially in
Mm-hmm.
an I can't recall a time in an interview that I have not been asked, what are your weaknesses? Because at the end of the day, A, they're expecting you to say something because everybody has them one way or probably more than one, really, if you really think about it hard. Everyone has at least more than one. And two, I think they want you to see how you handle the negativity because it's kind of a negative question. You know, you want everything in interviews to be perfect and all positive, and I'm the perfect candidate. I'm A, B, C, and D. But when they ask you the weaknesses question, you're like, oh no, what do I say? Do I say I'm hardworking and sometimes that drives me into the ground? How do you spin it? What's the right way to do it? So first off, know your weaknesses when you walk in the door. That's number one. Know what, like I said, I know I'm type A, and I know it's sometimes hard for me to let go. Now, I work well in groups, but it's hard for me sometimes to say, where is it in the project? Where is it? Is it with her? Is it with, if it's not with me, where is it? And I have that sometimes in contracts, it's with somebody for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I want to get it out the door. I want it signed if it's ready. Mm-hmm. So I think in an interview setting, when someone asks you what your weaknesses are, it's important to acknowledge that you have them because everyone does. And it's also important to acknowledge, A, it could be a strength depending on the situation. For instance, I think having control, it also shows some organization. I think it shows I have the ability to stay organized because I want to know where things are all the time. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's a negative because sometimes it hinders, A, B, C, and D. So you want to show that you acknowledge the weakness, you try to work on it, and you try to allow it to not affect your work and it wouldn't affect you in your position.
Right. So here's a big one. Here's a big question because it's life these days. It's today with social media. It's so much of our lives. Like I was on Twitter trying to get more followers and Instagram just before this show. So I'm constantly working on this and it takes up a lot of time, but it's important, I guess, to keep your brand consistent on social media. How do we do that?
Well, first, know who you are, know your brand. And second, make sure the people who are following you, that are following you, are receiving the true self of who you are. Don't be someone you're not. Don't be, don't try to perceive yourself as someone who's going to be, like I'm a pretty simple girl. I obviously I do like pageants. I like clamming up and I get that way sometimes, but on the regular, I'm hanging out with my dog and my husband watching basketball. So, and that's the kind of person I pretty much portray myself as. I'm pretty active in my community. I try to advocate, myself for my chronic illness platform and my title. But on the day-to-day, I'm a motivated person hitting the gym, hanging out with my husband and having dinner. I think the important thing about social media is understanding that it is the window to your life. Someone can look right in and see who you are. Yeah, it is the window into who you are on the day-to-day. Employers look at it, potential relationships look at, anything, like if someone adds me on Facebook and you don't know who they are, you click, you see who their mutual friends are, you see who they associate with. And sometimes that also helps, like I said, know who follows you because you're associated with them as well. So right. It's deeper than just what you post. It's who you associate with. What's their brand? How does that work with you? It's pretty deep. You have to be careful with social media and make sure you post things that you want other people to perceive you as, and be true to yourself. There's no point in having a perception of people or a perception of yourself to other people, because then when they meet you, your personal brand's not going to make any sense at all. You're going to, you perceive yourself as someone who's lavish and this and that, and then they meet you and they're, you're neat and you're quiet, and, you want to be consistent so they know what to expect when they meet you.
So you don't want to go out to the supermarket looking one way and you're always on social media looking another way, and you're like, they recognize you and you're like, oh no.
They don't recognize you because you're that far off.
Not that far.
it's funny because I always find it funny. I will not post a selfie that does not show. It may not be the best photo of me I've ever taken, but I'm not going to post a selfie of me that I think shows me in a negative light. But I'm not a believer in photoshopping your selfies because I think that's kind of funny. I mean, I know that's a little off topic, but I think for me, that's not authentic. You're not showing that's like photoshopping. I don't know. I think it's funny. I think it's the whole concept of photoshopping selfies is really funny. But I feel like being consistent, like I said, I'll post selfies that I'm not fully done in hair and makeup because that's not me every day. I was even laughing with my husband today. I'm like, oh, I have to make sure I'm all done up this week because of the certain relationships that I have. And that's another point. I have meetings this week with professors and people like different companies for establishing relationships on behalf of the university. And I know, okay, I have to take it up a notch. And that's the different levels of personal branding. You have casual branding, you have professional branding. I almost want to call it business casual branding, where you're doing the day-to-day. But there's days where you have to elevate your brand to be the best part of your brand that you can be. So you may not, it's a lot of energy to be 100% all day, every day. You can't be 100% of your personal brand every day. Because it's impossible. You can't be 100% of your brand every day. Now, there's days where, like I said, tomorrow I'm meeting a CEO of a small company and we're going to work on establishing a relationship for research and things like that. And I know, okay, I have to make sure I look like I'm ready to, represent the university. I mean, I don't want to walk in and he's going to be like, who's this talking IP with me? You want to make sure you match the expectation, but still maintain true to who you are. Because at the end of the day, appearance is important to an extent. You don't need to be dolled up 24/7. At least I'm not a proponent of that. I think you can be presentable and confident in sweatpants and ponytail, but that's neither here nor there. But I think being dressed and presenting yourself appropriately for who you're meeting, I think goes a long way too in developing your brand and who you are.
I think that's absolutely right. And if you just think about some of the celebrities who go to the far extreme, like you said, photoshopping pictures, and I'm a huge fan of Beyonce, but she protects her brand to the point where she revoked pictures of her doing the ugly face as she was doing a performance a couple of years back. She was like, so they're like, no, don't show those pictures. And I can't blame her, but to take all those photos back off the internet once they're out there it is impossible. But, that's how protective and how important your brand is, that when even celebrities are going to extremes to protect it, you have to think about yourself. Like, what image are you giving out there? It doesn't mean you have to look perfect every time, like you said. But if you want to be considered a professional, they always had that old saying, dress for the job you want next. If that's what you want to do, you have to do it not only in your personal life and show that side of you, because like you said, employers are now looking at your social media. So if you're not projecting that image, then you're not going to get that next position where you need to have that image. So if you're shown with a drink in your hand, that might not be the image that corporation wants to project. So why would they promote you?
And I think it's important, and you highlighted a very, very important topic. If you have it, manage your privacy settings appropriately on your pages. Don't make everything public if you really don't have to. I don't think the entire public needs to see you with a drink in your hand. If you're a over 21 adult and you have a drink in your hand, I don't think that's going to show a negative perception of you. But I also don't think that's the perception you want to give your employer if they're looking for the public access that you're giving yourself on your Facebook profile. But if you want to share that with your friends, your personal close community, and that's why I think who you allow access to on your Facebook is very important, because you're associated by who's on your page as well. I think that you need to be cautious of who, how, and when you share these certain photos. And like I said, your privacy settings, if you manage them appropriately, I think they would be beneficial to protect yourself professionally.
You need to protect yourself that way. And on an aside, there are a lot of crazy people out there. You have to protect your security And you know, I can't tell you how many like weird things happen or people message you. So you do have to protect that as well, especially if you have family and young children. So, you know, your privacy, you're sharing photos of your kids, and make sure that's also protected. But absolutely, you know, everyone is looking. I mean, I can tell you when I was looking for a job, the first thing they would do would Google me. And
Right.
Google me, you know, let's put it this way. I'm way overqualified for many jobs, and I didn't get a lot of jobs because it's pretty intimidating. You know, you see some stuff that's like author and, you know, journalist of this and CEO of this. And, you know, unless it's an executive position where, you know, someone, you know, might recommend you for it, a lot of times that just sometimes your branding being so professional in my situation where I've done so many things can actually work against me. So, I mean, how about that? What did you do?
I think it's important to portray yourself as well-rounded as possible. I mean, I know you pretty well, you know me pretty well. We're both very professional. Our jobs mean a lot to us. Our careers mean a lot to us. And sometimes it's hard to, and I have friends who are attorneys and friends who are not. And the ones who are not, I feel like sometimes I almost have a better relationship with them because I have a life outside the law. And I think it's important to portray that as well. I think, you know, portraying that, you know, you have a dog that you love very much. That's something that I can definitely
We both can relate to,
yeah. Very, very well. And I feel like, you know, having that connection to outside of your career, because at the end of the day, professional development is important and it's a big part of your life, but it can be your entire life because at the end of the day, they want to know who you are. You know, office dynamics are just as important as being qualified for your job. Mm-hmm. And if you learn about your personality before they meet you or get an idea of, oh, she's social, she does community service, she likes being in a community because she did X, Y, or Z event. Even if it's just one event, that's enough to develop a perception in a Google search. I had questions about my pageant experience because that popped up on Google.
Oh, yeah.
That has popped up before.
That's not always considered positive in the corporate world, though. Sometimes it is, not always. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sometimes, you know, but that's the opportunity for you to say the importance of what it is that you do and why you enjoy doing it. So, for instance, I had a question. Oh, what's this pageant thing all about? I saw you with some shiny thing on your head. And,
okay.
No, it was corporate, you know, very, very a corporate setting. Uh-huh. And I explained to him that I actually changed his perception, at least what it appeared to change his perception on pageantry. And that, you know, I was able to conduct community service. I was able to perform at 30 or 40 events. You know, I was able to portray my platform. I developed how to interview the way I'm interviewing with you right now and speak in a professional manner and speak with, you know, integrity and professionalism.
And confidence. Because you're great at that. Yes. You're welcome.
I think, you know, and I at that point, I feel like I had to defend my brand because I think pageantry defined a big part of who I am. Yes. And don't be afraid to defend your brand because at the end of the day, you don't have to change for anybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, you are who you are. And not to say that, like I said, your brand is going to continuously evolve as you grow professionally. And don't be afraid of the evolution. Embrace it. Because I think that, I think that evolution is something that you need to, that's how you're going to grow professionally. It's how you're going to grow as a person, personally. That's how you're going to grow, is if you embrace the fact that, you know, I used to love this, but now, you know, as I'm getting older, it's a little different because now it's, you know, I didn't maybe have the best experience doing it this way. You know, I think having the adaptability and acceptance that your brand will grow, but still defending the things that are near and dear to your heart, because there's some things that will never change, like my love for shiny crowns. I think those are two things that are very important for your brand. Don't be afraid to defend it, but also be willing to be adaptable and to grow.
No, absolutely. So what I'm hearing from you is consistency through your personal, through business, through job interviews, whatever it is, it's consistency, right?
Yeah. But it's consistency until you see a flaw. That's something you can change. And, you know, I think there's something that what's an example that I can give of that? I've learned, as you can tell, I'm a pretty talkative person. I like to gab. I like to chitter chatter.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned sometimes short and sweet's the way to go. And I've learned that, sometimes less is more with what you say. And it's not what you say, but how you say it. And I've learned for me, in the long run, like I said, I was a chatterbox. I've always, what about this? What about that? I always wanted to interject my opinion. And sometimes I listen back, and that's where listening came in. I wasn't always the best listener. I learned that professionally in different experiences. And now I'm evolving my personal brand to be a better listener. And at the end of the day, I think it'll make me a better professional. It'll make me a better spouse, probably. My husband probably would appreciate that more. And it makes me a better person all around by accepting the fact that things sometimes need to change. You're not always going to be the best person every single day. And you're going to have to acknowledge the fact that there's changes you need to make as you grow.
Okay, no, I agree with that 100%. What good advice. People who miss this, they don't know what they're missing. This will help you grow this whole interview. So it will be available on the replay. So I'm hoping that more and more people will come on and click play, because you gave us such valuable information today about growing your personal brand. Please tell the audience, those who will watch later and those who are live with us right now, how they can get in contact with you for more information.
Absolutely. So I'm actually in the process of writing an ebook about quick tips on how to develop your personal brand. So that should be out soon. If you're interested in receiving a copy or you have questions for me, my email is T as in Teena, Handline, HANDLINE @gmail.com. If you want to contact me, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to network and have some calls. Anything that would help you professionally, I'm here to help.
All right. Thank you, Teena. If you enjoyed this interview, please tweet it out right now before we go off air so that others can benefit from the replay. I thank you all for watching and interacting with us. You guys were a great audience. Teena, you were awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope that you come on again so we can talk some more, because this was absolutely great and informative. I think so many people can learn from this. So thank you all for watching. Take care and good night.
Night.